Welcome back. And thank the good Lord it's Friday because Julie and I get to vamp. We get to talk about whatever we want to on Friday. This is what we call our fabulously fun Friday freak show. No, fabulously,
Sometimes.
fabulously fun Friday free for all, where we talk about really what we want to, what is most on our minds. And we actually spent probably, I don't know, 2 hours prior. What do you think, Julie, to
Yeah,
today's
give or take.
podcast?
And of course, throughout the week, we talk about stuff for this show.
Yeah, but we wanted it. You and I were trying to get on the same page. What we were both interested in talking about for today's podcast. Today's, our free for all Friday, and the unfortunate thing is we've been so mired, so deep in the weeds with all of our real estate coaching clients and all these
Mhm.
masterminds we've been doing, all these other things. The only thing on my mind is real estate stuff. So unfortunately, I don't think this show's gonna have the same bent as some of the past ones we were talking about, more zany things like so. Maybe you'll have to hold off on some of your funny octopus stories, and maybe we
Yeah.
won't talk about aliens until future Friday. What do you think?
Well, if anything gets too heavy, I reserve the right to throw an octopus story in there. We'll see.
I probably had this week at least 20 different, maybe 25 different conversations with agents that are in our EXP Realty group or coaching clients, or a lot of them are the same thing. And they're all about essentially the same specific, they're all presenting in different ways, you
Hmm.
know? They'll come to you and I or one of our coaches and they'll say, well, this is my challenge. This is right? And they always think that whatever they're experiencing, they always just think it's a unique challenge. Like they're the only ones experiencing it. They're
Right.
the only ones having this particular problem. What they don't realize is that, I mean, I cannot remember the last time on any of those calls I've had with agents where they've had a unique problem that isn't being experienced by literally thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of other people at the same time.
Hmm.
There's a little bit of a sense of, I think, calm that comes in knowing that you're not alone with what you're working through. And so here was the challenge.
Hmm.
Here's what I discovered. At this time of year, we're entering into the middle of the year, which is incredible to think about. But we're entering into the middle of 2025. I'm getting a lot of questions, and you are too. Most of your coaching clients are the ones making over $1 million per year. And
Hmm.
I'm interested in what your input is on this because we didn't really drill down on this with
Sure.
your personal clients. Most of the people I'm talking to fall into three categories, one of three categories. They're agents, and it doesn't matter whether they're new agents or seasoned agents or top of the hill agents. They are either ahead of their goals by quite a margin. It doesn't seem like there's anybody I talk to that isn't ahead of their goals. If they're ahead of their goals, they're not just a little bit on track. They're not a little bit, they're way ahead of their goals. They're like
Hmm.
grand slam after grand slam. So there's people that are 100% pulling away from the herd. That's number one. Number two is the on track people. Those are the people that had a goal of selling 100 homes or 50 homes or 10 homes this particular year. And based on what they've got closed and based on what they have pending and based on maybe some listings that haven't sold and some really good AAA buyers, they should, they're on track. They should do just fine. And then there are the ones that were behind on their goals. And they all seem to fall into one of those three categories. And it was fascinating how they were all struggling in their own unique ways, but all struggling around the exact same sets of problems.
How would you categorize that if you were to sort of homogenize all of that? What two or three problems would you say are the most common things that you're hearing?
Consistency with lead generation is always number one. It always manifests itself in different ways. And the way I remember very clearly a conversation I had with someone yesterday. They were in South Florida, and this group was doing over 100 million, and they were contacting me because they wanted to join our EXP Realty group, and they were, it's a big team of like 30 or 37 agents, and he was expressing to me what his concerns were, the challenges he was having in his business.
Hmm.
And it was all he was saying, well, my agents just, he thought he did have a coaching and training problem. He did have a pre-qualifying problem, but neither of those two things were his principal issue. The principal issue he was having is a lead quality problem, and he didn't really see it as that.
Hmm.
So in other words, he was, I don't want to talk, he didn't give me permission to talk about him. If I give too many details, I know he listens and I don't want to get any hell for it. Um, I will say this: he's a Zillow Flex agent, and he was buying a lot of leads from Zillow. He's buying almost all of his leads. That's really the moral of the story. They weren't doing any proactive lead generation. Even remember, these
Sure.
are not coaching clients. This is somebody that wants to become a coaching client and someone wants to join us DXP. And so I asked him, how does he know? So he wanted to blame his agents for basically crappy lead generation, crappy lead follow up, and all the rest of it, which, okay, that's a good first place to go.
Hmm.
Their production was down, those agents on the buyer side. So on the listing side of his business, the business was up. On the buyer side of the business was down. The cost structure on the buyer side of the business, he was spending more money to generate more leads, and the number of closings happening as a result were falling, not increasing. And
So more money, fewer transactions.
right. And he was robbing Peter to pay Paul. So he was taking the profit from his listings and he
Hmm.
was then running what would have been his profit, which is the whole damn point of having a business, is to have profit. He was spending that profit on more lead generation on the buyer side, and he was not seeing a return on his investment. I mean,
Sure.
you've had a billion of these calls too.
And that was creating frustration and stress to him.
Yeah. And then not only that, but it was, I don't want to, dominate this podcast, but his mindset was to the point where he was going to go down with the ship, and he was willing to start spending more and more of his money, what would have been his profit, to the point where he was running an unprofitable business just to keep the buyer side of the business afloat.
Yeah.
And he had already spent, as I asked him, he didn't answer it directly, but I have had so many of these coaching calls, I can read between the lines. He had already spent a lot of his savings keeping this buyer agent team in this slightly dysfunctional, deal going for the last 3 years. So he didn't really have a lot of cash savings or anything to lean into.
Yeah, but it's interesting. Let me jump in here. It is interesting from a mindset perspective, because that is kind of a profile that we hear from team leaders now and then, and even from brokerages sometimes that are paying for leads and maybe perhaps Zillow dependent, is that when you have spent some of your own cash savings and or some of the cash flow from the listing side, it makes you almost more attached to wanting it to work. Like you said, maybe he has some ego attached
he
to
lost
it.
his objectivity. That's what you're
That's
talking
what I'm
about.
saying. Because
Yeah,
because you have like that personal investment that you want
right.
it to work.
Right. He lost his objectivity. And that's
Mhm.
really what, I think you and I, that's what we do primarily, especially your coaching clients. You're dealing with all these really top, monster agents, and they have you lose your objectivity. You lose your objective.
Sure.
We do in our own business. I have to have people come in sometimes and
Yeah.
say,
Because
this
you're
is
in
getting
it.
by.
You're in the thick of it.
And you also kind of fall in love with some from old ideas. They become institutionalized. They just become something that you always have done and always will do. And that's it.
Sure.
You stop holding it accountable. And that's exactly what he had done. So he had all of these expenses that were going out for the sake of lead generation. And again, I'm sure his agents could do a better job at lead follow-up. They're not doing furiously fast lead follow-up. They're probably doing a bad job with pre-qualifying. We can always assume those are two like low-hanging fruit from a coaching perspective. You could always pick on someone
No
for
matter
those.
what, in any market at any time. And yeah,
Exactly.
of course.
Exactly. You're right.
Sure.
I mean, we could always pick on you, dear listener or viewer, if you're watching us on YouTube, for not having furiously fast lead follow-up and not pre-qualifying. All right.
Mhm.
So that aside, what really was the issue, in my opinion, because the past performance of a majority of his buyer agents, the past performance was very good, and they'd done good, Julie. So the market for the last 3 years has been the most challenging market that you and I have seen, arguably, in our entire real estate careers.
Yes.
That's even considering, and we've been in this for 24 years. And even if you look at the real estate crash actually was easier to make money then than it is now for a lot of
Hmm.
these agents, because there was more opportunity, because there were more motivated sellers. We were teaching them
Uh-huh.
how to do short sales and all
Leads
that.
were abundant.
Right. And everyone knew that the market was going to come back, and they saw these investors coming in. So there was from peak to trough, it was 2007, later in 2007
Hmm.
to 2009, and the market started to come back.
Hmm.
We've been in this same market for 3 years, similar to what was happening before. But ultimately, what's happened is that for this guy in particular, the buyer agents he had been performing well for the past 2.5, let's say, years, and he was buying the leads and supplying them the leads, and their volume, their personal production has dropped off. So he either had a collective mindset issue in his brokerage, that's possible, or at his team, and or the quality of the leads had literally gone to the toilet. And I'm suggesting to him that the quality of the leads was what the problem was, but he had no objective way of solving for that problem. So there was no resolution to his problem unless he was willing to get into the actual frontline work of pre-qualifying those leads himself to determine really what their motivational level was. And his agents had been telling him that his solution to the problem was buy more leads. and the solution to the problem wasn't working. So the ultimate issue that he was experiencing was the quality of the leads from the lead sources that he was buying these leads from is declining
Diminished.
rapidly, which is predictable because what we see, and this is, you guys, if you're in this business, if you're blessed or cursed, depending on your perspective, to be in this business as long as we have, and some of you have been a lot longer than we have, you will see these trends. They'll come and they go. And that's one of the things you and I talked about this morning on our walk, right? So you see these big macro trends in real estate. They come and they go, they come and they go. And it does feel, and Julie and I were trying to predict for the sake of our podcast today, this one, we were trying to predict what would be the macro trends that we see that appear to be declining, that appear not to be working. In other words, what are the things that you're doing now that were working in the past that aren't working now? And can you objectively identify what those things are? And do you have the courage and the strength to stop doing them after you've assessed that they're not working at the same level? So the question ultimately then becomes, let's say, for example, you're doing, I'll pick something really easy. Let's say you're doing a direct mail campaign to a particular geographic area. And let's say 5 or 6 years ago, you were getting pretty consistent business from it. You could track maybe, enough closings that you were 3 or 4xing your money. You spent 10,000 a year and you were making 50,000 or, whatever the ratio was. It made sense. Just making up numbers, right? But now for the last 24 months, it hasn't been working. So you got to ask yourself, why is it not working? Is it not working because the market's oversaturated with too many other agents that you're competing with that are doing direct mail? Is the market not work? Is it not working just because the sales velocity in that marketplace has changed? People aren't selling, or are the buyers not buying because they're choosing different neighborhoods or new construction? When was the last time you actually went in and did, as Julie likes to say, a checkup from the neck up?
Neck up. Yeah, that's right. An assessment of what's actually going on. We had that happen in our sales careers. There were neighborhoods that were previously hot that now are not.
Right.
And, I think that I do see this more. I'm interested to see whether you would agree with this or not, but I think that the agents that are doing a bit more volume can fall prey to this more because they're like in the production, they're doing their productivity, they're doing deals. They've got a decent amount of velocity, but mentally they're a little bit stalled out because they just, it works so well for a while and then it doesn't. And it's easy to say, oh, well, the quality of the lead sucks or my agents are not,
but Julie, sometimes
it's not that.
Well, no, sometimes it's exactly that. Sometimes it's exactly the quality of the lead suck. And that's what I'm seeing. The quality of the online leads.
As a trend, you're saying that the lead quality is going down?
In my opinion, and this is only in my opinion, but I've definitely I think anyone who's been buying leads for a long time, we have a lot of coaching clients that do it, and a lot of our EXP family, they're buying leads as well. But to a person, none of them are saying the lead quality's gotten better. Find an agent online that's saying ABC is a great source to buy leads from. It just doesn't exist anymore.
No, I never see that.
It is definitely worth mentioning that back in 2007, 2008, buying leads really from Zillow were phenomenal. You could get great, very motivated leads, but now everyone and their brother does it. So my suspicion is this. I think a lot of these online lead sellers have lost a lot of their recurring revenue from their agents. And so the number of clients that they have to sell leads to has dropped precipitously. And so what they're trying to do is make ends meet by selling lower quality leads. So for them to generate a lead to sell to you guys, they have to spend money, buying the lead themselves. So they're buying the lead. Maybe they're doing pay-per-click. Maybe they're doing, who knows what they're doing to generate the lead, all these different traditional sources that they're doing. And maybe the cost of them to generate leads has gone through the roof because they're competing for that click that's going to become a lead that they're going to sell to you. They're competing with 30 other companies that are trying to replicate and do the same exact thing. So the whole space from the wholesale level of the guys that generate the lead to the retail level, the guys that are selling the leads to you guys, has probably just become oversaturated to the point where they're now trying to selling lower quality leads in order to stay in business. And I think that's what happens. And that's the sign of the end of a trend, in my opinion. I personally think that also consumers are wise to it. There's no clever way to generate. Zillow and Realtor.com has got the best mousetraps, really. But beyond that, there's I really do think consumers are weary of any kind of coercive opt-in where they know their information is going to be sold. People are just burned out on it,
Yeah.
So who knows? What do you guys think? What do the listeners? What do you viewers think? Put it in the comments. This is again. So going back to the three levels, right? So you have agents that are behind their goals, on track their goals, and way ahead of their goals. So Julie, I'm going to talk to you about your coaching clients.
Sure.
What are the things that your agents, your top drawer, elite, what are they doing right now? Here, let me reframe it. What is it that they're doing to be so far ahead of the average agent in their market that what are the things they're doing that they wouldn't want anyone else to know about? Like what if they're
I
like,
can't tell you.
right.
Just kidding.
But what are the top maybe 2 or 3 things that are probably counterintuitive that your top agents that are earning at least $1 million per year in commission are doing that they would, if only given the opportunity to do one thing for lead generation, that would be what their one thing was?
Well, that's interesting you frame the question that way, because my answer would be they're not doing just one thing is why they are ahead.
Well, that's the reason I made it hard on you. So
Yeah,
what would
so
be
I
the
caught
one
that.
thing? Yeah.
I would say that the number one thing they're doing is better quality, more frequent, and something of value follow-up with leads from fourth quarter, especially, and a much tighter focus on their past clients and centers of influence.
Okay, go
as
back.
well as something that's even more proactive than that, simultaneously, the ones that are in momentum. And I also have to point out something that you alluded to earlier.
Talk about number one. Talk about number one. You just said something, and the other points.
The follow-up part?
Talk about the fourth quarter part.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I know this as a fact because we go over it on coaching calls all the time. What are the sources? We track all this with what we teach them in coaching.
Where did the lead come from? That's the question, right?
Listings.
Right.
Almost always listings, past listings, open house leads from fourth quarter, sign calls from fourth quarter, just general, leads generated by listing. Listing agents are by far more ahead so far this year than agents that are very buyer dependent. Also, to your point of the buying of leads and buying mostly what they sell is buyer leads. And, from a coaching perspective, I think you'd agree with this. Just the statistics on that alone are terrible. Why would you want to talk to 1 in 200 people to maybe get one lead that's maybe your lead, maybe not?
But you said it right there.
Yeah.
So the bottom line is the agents that are really pulling away from the herd, I don't remember ever in the whole time we've been coaching, and even when we sold real estate, Julie, there was such a difference between what the top agents are doing and everybody else.
I'd agree with that.
It's extraordinary. And some of your coaching clients are earning more money now, despite the fact that there's going to be 4.1 million home sales, despite the fact this is the third year in a row of record low home sales. You have agents now that are literally, you've got one gal in particular, don't mention her name because you didn't ask permission, who went from making less than $100,000, and she's tracking now in this year to make over $1 million. And
potentially, yes. If everything that we have on, say we're less than halfway through the year, she's already tracking on what she has in the pipeline between listings, coming soon listings, buyers who also have homes to sell. So again, staying listing focused. She already has in the pipeline somewhere between about 425 and 525 in GCI. So if we double that trajectory, and she does, here's the key. And I would say nearly all of my elite coaching clients, these are my one-on-one clients that are on track or quite a bit ahead. It's because they are never listless. They never get to the point where they have nothing to advertise, to market, to hold open, to do just listed, just sold, door knocking around, all of the things that listings create for you. So a lot of my job is to make sure they stay in momentum, and we identify, especially when they're that busy. So for example, that client that you're talking about that I, lovingly brag on some of our walks, her biggest danger zone is that she's got her last closing happening this week. She's got 3 listings coming, but after that flurry of business, we have to make sure that she's identifying the next 3, right? And that we don't just have a flurry of closings and then starve the next 2 or 3 months.
Okay, pause. So what you just said was what I was telling some of these agents that are at the top of the game. Exactly. The biggest risk that they have is complacency. That's what you're saying. So talk about
and complacency isn't just sitting on the couch eating bonbons watching Oprah, okay? Complacency it comes in different flavors.
I don't think Oprah's on TV anymore.
Well, okay. Fill in the blank. Instagram influencer eating bonbons.
Exactly.
Okay?
No, they're watching cat videos on Instagram.
Fair enough.
We can update our references.
Yeah. Okay. But complacency also can be playing whack-a-mole all day because you got 5 things pending and you've never had 5 pendings in your life. And you figure that, you do have to save those deals, but complacency and lead generation is what I'm talking about.
100%.
Allowing yourself to go dry on leads or to not have any more listing inventory, even having one really great listing at a time is so much better than being buyer dependent.
Well, your elites have minimum standards, which pertains to the number of listings they have at all times.
That's
You
right.
said that, but that's really truly the bottom line. So if you're one of the agents out there that are having your best years ever, and all the stars are finally aligned for you, all your dreams are going to come true, green lights just straight ahead.
Mm-hmm.
You are going to, the risk that you run into is going to be, as Julie said, being too busy, doing the closings and all the rest of it. The lead generation is going to pause. And she also said this, I don't know if you guys were listening, the business that you generated in fourth quarter that would have closed in fourth quarter that didn't because they were worried about the election or alien visitations or
The
freaking,
delayed beginning of the year. Yeah.
or what were the drones over New Jersey or the hell, right?
All that stuff.
All
Yeah.
that stuff. So those people took themselves out of the market. And guess what? A lot of those people took themselves out of the market at the very beginning of this year as well. Those people that you generated, and this is what top agents and Julie and I are, we're definitely having similar experiences. Those agents are having their best years ever when they go back to say June 2024 forward and following up on all their leads and centers of influence and past clients. Because there were a lot of people that put their decision to move. Oh, interest rates are going to go down. Interest rates are going to go up. The presidential election.
They were waiting.
And a lot of folks are done waiting, and and there is evidence of that. Now, there was a lot of bullshit headlines. Like there was one that everyone was talking about recently, and I actually saved it to share it with you guys. And then I want to go back and close the loop that we were talking about as pertains to these three things. Let me find this headline again. Hopefully I did not close this.
Well, so while you're looking for that, one of the points that we're making here is more relentless lead follow-up, recognizing the fact that a lot of the transactions that are closed, that are pending right now or closed in the past 30 days were from fourth quarter. It's like we had a delayed start to the year. You remember we had slow sales for January, February, and even March. And now it's like the spring market has started to happen. And that's the feeling that's out there. So maybe it's off by a couple months, but it's still happening. And I'm going to go take care of that. So back to you.
That's right.
Hopefully you found that article.
Well, I didn't, but I remember it. So the gist of this article was talking about, it was from National Association of Realtors, and they were talking about the fact that I think home closings were off, and it was in all the headlines from all the clickbaity real estate outlets were talking about it was the fewest number of closings or something like that since March of 2019. Well, Julie and I, of course, researched to find out what the actual difference was. And the difference that they're talking about year over year is so inconsequential that it doesn't even
It was like 2.4%, I think.
Yeah, total. And that was national. And it doesn't even merit talking about it. But what did all these bridge trolls do with this information? They said, oh, the real estate market's about to crash. Oh, there's going to be all kinds of all these horrible things happening and just all this other stuff. And if you're one of the folks that are paying attention to that and you're believing that tomorrow is going to be worse than today, and we talk about this all the time on this podcast, which, by the way, whether you're behind, on track, or ahead, the mindset that you have and how you handle the inputs of information is ultimately going to determine your outcome more than anything. So if you're reading these headlines and you're not thinking in your head, well, I wonder what that actually constitutes in terms of what the slowdown actually was. And was there an actual slowdown in my marketplace? Did I get in the MLS to actually see if there are fewer closings that happened in, March or whatever? And you will find for the most part that you will not find any reason whatsoever to even remotely concern yourself with that doom and gloom headline. And yet everybody wanted to talk about it. And if you were of the mindset to believe that that was true, and then again, tomorrow was going to be worse than today, what are you not going to do today that you otherwise would have been doing had you believed that tomorrow was going to be better? So if you believe, for example, that, tomorrow is going to be worse than today, you're certainly not going to do the things that you don't want to do when you don't want to do it at the highest level today. You're not most likely going, the real estate market's going to crash. Well, why should I go take a listing? We've had people say that to us.
I know. And to your point about the headlines, if they say that, foreclosures and pre-foreclosures are up by 100%, well, that just means they went from 2% to 3%. That's not up by that percent or by some precipitous amount. So, you have to put it in context, right? And not be the doom and gloom. I think one of the things we talked about on our walk was that the weak agents are starting to get weaker because they believe some of that stuff and they're not doing their own homework and their own research and making their own headlines and leading with who they can help and not worrying about who doesn't need their help.
So if you're a top agent, just so we're closing these loops, and Julie and I don't have a script today. So if you're a top agent, the number one thing you need to consider doing is isolating your mindset, really siloing yourself up and being very, 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 this is true for all three groups, but really for the top agents, making sure you're not getting sucked into the headlines. Don't give yourself a break. In other words, you've probably worked your ass off for the last probably 6 months, fourth quarter of last year into now. Don't stop. Don't you give yourself a week, give yourself a long weekend, but do not stop. Start building momentum. Don't say, well, I've had a great, run of it. I've made more money than I ever thought I would. You got to look at this as nothing other than a launching pad for what's going to be a 10-year run, and do it based off listings. That's definitely true for the top agents. And don't waste your money on stupid gimmicks. The question isn't, okay, now I've made a bunch of money because I was proactively lead generating, working my centers of influence. Now what marketing campaign can I do? Where should I spend my money on branding? Or I guess I'm going to go buy a moving truck. No, put the money in the bank, save the money, invest the money, start building wealth for yourself. You're not going, people say, well, the best investment I can make is investing it back into my business. That is rarely true in real estate. The best investment you can make in your business as a real estate practitioner is making a profitable real estate business and then taking that profit and reinvesting it in things that make you passive income. Rental properties, dividend paying stocks. If you're an EXP Realty, revenue share is the seventh wonder of the world, all these things. So that's how you should think. And so if you think, well, my business is a real estate sales business, and when I make any profit, I've got to go out and buy branding or buy marketing, you're never going to have anything to show for all your efforts. And your business isn't sellable. Nobody's going to buy your business. So the asset, the real value, the real product from your real estate business, there's a lot of it's because it's a service business, by the way. The asset of the service business is the database, ultimately, your customer list. But the only thing that you're really truly building are the assets that come from the profit you make from your business, and the profit then enabling you to invest in those assets. Hopefully that makes sense. But if you look at any agent who's ever retired, or become wealthy, it's not from their real estate sales business being sold. It's from them making enough profit from their sales business that they're then able to take that profit and reinvest it in other things that produce passive income. And, you guys got to really be thinking about what your mission is. And if some of you have had your butts handed to you in the last 3 years because of the market, and you're saying to yourself, I don't want to ever go through this again, then don't. Make it so that this time around, when you're rebuilding yourself, you're going to do it around profit. And don't follow I'll tell you guys another major trend that I think has already come to an end that nobody's really talking about are these big, massive buyer agent based real estate practices and brokerages, teams and brokerages, where the buyer agents are not required to do proactively generating themselves. The days of being able to make any kind of profit from a buyer side focused brokerage or real estate team where you're buying all the leads for the buyer's agents have been over that's probably been over for 5 years. Remember the story about the guy having to use his profit from the listing side to subsidize the buyer side, hoping and praying that business would come back one day? I think you should operate on the assumption that it never will. And it's not because you suck as a business person. It's not because there's anything wrong with your ability. You are probably an A player at this point. I'm talking to, somebody out there. I know I am. You're probably an A player who was for a long time chasing an A quality opportunity, the team and making margins and doing these things and making processing fees and maybe doing brokerage and or mortgage and all these things, right? So your expansive vision was beautiful. It was elegant. You're an A player. You're an entrepreneur. But what you don't realize is the business model that you are forming that may have worked in the past very well for you, isn't working anymore. So now you're an A player trying to make a B opportunity work. And that's just going to frustrate you. So what you need to do is you need to go back to, you are an A player. You need to acknowledge the fact that you're an A player based on your past performance, and then look for an A level opportunity. And if you don't, you're going to frustrate yourself. And then your internal confidence, you're physically going to wear yourself out. You're mentally and spiritually going to wear yourself out. And then you're going to start believing your best days are behind you. Julie, are you thinking of any coaching clients in particular as I say this?
Well, I think there's something to be said for staying in momentum, and that sometimes that feels like a stressful thing to do because you've got all these plates spinning, and now my coach is laying on top of me that I better stay in momentum and I better go get my next listings. I appreciate that that is stressful. We used to live that life, but it is less stressful than becoming listless and deal-less. And I sometimes will tease a coaching client that's having like their most rocking month ever. Say you have $100,000 month. That's great by anybody's means, right? That's a fantastic month. And then you do all of your closings the next month, and that 100 becomes like 50 a month, and then it becomes 100 for that quarter, which still isn't terrible, but it's not like celebrating 100,000 for the month. You know what I'm saying? It's easier to keep in momentum than it is to recover from sliding.
Because your revenue dropped is what you're saying. So you can have a great month, but if your great month is followed by not so great months, then it all averages out to be just okay.
Exactly.
Well, I'm going to give a real, I'm trying to think if this coaching client would want me to use his name. He probably wouldn't, so I'm not going to use it. All right. So I'm going to tell you guys a story, and this is a true story. One of the most successful real estate teams in the nation, one of the top 20 New York Times or Wall Street Journal top agent lists, all the lists, all the awards, all the everythings. So large team. I'll just leave it at that. They're exact same situation I'm describing. Lots of buyer agents, like 30 of them. And then the listing side of the business is handled by 2 listing agents. And that was basically how, and they were able to lead generate the buyer sides. They were focused almost primarily on buyer sides, made an enormous amount of money in actual GCI, like 9 million in GCI. And what year was it? 4 years ago, 5 years ago, in 1 year. It was a huge number. And so what happened is the market shifted, the market changed, the opportunity. So this person was an A-level player at the time chasing an A-level opportunity. Then the A-level opportunity, because interest rates rose, because other things changed, because buyer agents' commissions in their market kind of took a step.
FOMO dried up.
FOMO dried up, right. Exactly. Buyer agents started demanding more, all these things. And then what happened was that this person was still trying to maintain that same exact structure, the same exact number of people, was beating themselves up. Notice I'm not using pronouns on purpose. Beating themselves up and trying to keep the old model with the old structure, the old support structure, all the salaries, they burned it at both ends, and it didn't work out for them financially. Now they're rebuilding, and it's fantastic. It's so exciting. So again, I don't want to give too much detail. I'll just talk in broad sweeping generalities. I gave them the assignment of working on their listing side of the business because the listing opportunity in their particular market was going through the roof. Lots of expired days of the market was extending, and they resisted me a little bit. And then finally it snapped as they suffered another like quarter of negative growth. They're losing money. They said, okay, we're going to do it. And so then we set the goal. It was a partnership. Okay. I set the goal. They agreed. I think I'm trying to remember the number. I think it was a combined listings of 12, and then we increased it to 15, and then we increased it to 20. 20 was what we did last week. So the goal is to have 20 listings at all times. Now here's where it gets interesting. Their goal, or the original goal, was like 12 listings at all times. It took them probably about maybe a month and a half to get back in the swing of things, to have 12 active listings at all times, but they did it. And now this is what's really cool, Julie. First of all, they're blessed with a high average sell price. Their average commission is 30 grand. So they have 12 active listings at all times. I said, just focus on this. Have 12 active listings at all times. And how many of those active listings will sell on average per month? And their market's slowing down. It was like 120 days in the market was average. Showings were way off, the whole thing. So it was essentially I would say a balanced market becoming a buyer's market. 12 active listings at all times has resulted consistently, Julie, in only 3 closings per month. Only 3 of those active listings are selling per month on average, but they're making $100,000 a month effectively now just off those listings that they weren't taking a year ago, 8 months ago, because they weren't focusing on it. So now they're making $100,000. And what is the cost against that $100,000 per month? It's basically nothing. So the profit they're making from having 12 listings at all times now is substantially more than the amount of profit they're making from having to manage all those buyer agents, having to manage all the support for the buyer agents, having to do all the meetings, having to rent the space for the buyer agent, the whole thing. just by them deciding to sit down, drill down, say, what's our mission in real estate? Is it to build a big, star-struck, amazing headline leading real estate team, or is it to make profit? And when they said, well, we don't have a choice now but to make profit because we burned it at both ends, then they decided to drill down on listings, and now they're absolutely kicking ass. And this is the reason I'm especially excited for them. They both have completely woken up to what we're, the power of being listing agents. Now that we've reset the goal to 20 listings at all times. So 20 listings at all times will result in probably 5 or 6 closings. Keep it conservative. So let's say 5. Average commission of $30,000. Are you listening, listeners? Are you watching, viewers? They're going to make close to $2 million a year to them with virtually no expense. How are they getting the listings? You're all wondering. Guess what they're doing? They're calling expireds. They're calling their centers of influence and past clients. They're kind of calling for sale by owners. They're calling for rent by owners. They're picking up the phones, work that one of the two partners has never done before, the other has, and they're focused. We're going to have 20 listings at all times. So their new minimum standard in life is to have 20 listings at all times, because they know no matter what, when they have 20 listings at all times, they're going to make close to $2 million a year. I'm just, honestly, I don't like to say I'm proud of somebody, but I told them on the coaching call, I was proud of them. Well, that's not the right emotion for a coach to have.
Well, but they turned the corner. You are proud of them for making the decision to not wait until it got worse to turn that corner.
It couldn't have gotten much worse for them. I'll just leave it at that.
Well, and that's part of the reason why we tell these stories, is because it's a cautionary tale. And we hope that, there are people that it takes it getting bad enough that, okay, now I've got to do that.
But Julie, what kept them, why did they decide to sort of continue to go down with the ship? It's because it's what we were talking about before. They were too married. They were not objective about what was working, what wasn't working. And we've seen this in the 4 real estate slowdowns that we've experienced from a coach's perspective since we started coaching, is that people hold on too long to things that don't work. Remember, I was talking to you guys about the trends, things that were working that are not working now, and are you objective about them? They were making all those same mistakes. Julie and I have done that in our coaching business for sure. We doged the hell out of our business in the last 90 days. And we found things that were like, our staff insisted, oh, you can't cancel that. We're definitely using it. Really? What's the username and password? Blip, 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 blip. Hasn't been used for 2 years. I found one of those. Yes. Did you get
legacy
my message?
apps and things like that?
Did you get my message about that?
Yeah.
2 years.
You have to do some self-auditing, painful as it can be sometimes. You mentioned something I don't want to skim past, is that in order for the people that you're talking about right now to have built that listing inventory back up to something that's more predictable, they're not just doing one thing, right? Maybe there was something that used to work, especially during the pandemic. A lot of agents were dependent on past client center of influence. Everybody wanted to transact all the time. They're doing not just one thing, they're calling expireds. I have a lot of coaching clients where 25 to 30% of their current trajectory, their pendings or coming soons, are expireds. And that's because they have supplemented what they used to be more dependent on, just past client center of influence, repeat and referral. They've got to be doing more, okay? And being very focused on listing inventory. Listings drive everything.
But listings is a mindset. If you're going to focus, so going after a buyer is more of a, well, you said it best, Julie, in our book, Harris Rules, right? So when you're working with buyers is mostly a social, physical exercise.
Physical labor. You're running around, jiggling lock boxes, showing, driving from to and fro. It is physical labor.
And there's really not that much sales skills that are involved with working with buyers. Really,
find a good house. Yeah.
Finding a good house. And the house will sell itself. If anything, the skills that's necessary to be a successful buyer's agent is not opening your mouth too frequently and talking yourself out of the buyer buying a house they otherwise would have, really, at the end of the day. But on the listing side, it does take skills. But the agents that are in the on track spot and the head spot are definitely the ones that are listings focused.
100%.
And so that's really the moral of the story. And if you just think about how simple it is, what I just said, if you were to focus your best energies on being a listing agent and really, drill down on what that skill set requires, you can increase your income, decrease your income, increase your effort, decrease your effort. And, so if you only get really good at 4 things in real estate, and these are the 4 things: it's lead generation, it's pre-qualifying, it's presenting, and it's negotiating, and it's closing. By closing, I mean, literally closing to get the signature, closing to finalize the contract when you get a buyer side, those types of things. You need to learn how to negotiate, but it's really those 4 skills, arguably 5. Julie's going to throw in there furiously fast lead follow-up, and I'm going to agree. But if that's all you ever get good at, you're going to do great because everything else can be easily delegated. So, Julie, I asked you a question. I said, if there's only one thing that these guys could be doing, we agree that it or should be focused on, your top elites are focusing on are taking more listings.
Yes.
So how are they generating those listing leads? I know they're proactively picking up the phone. They're calling centers of influence and past clients. They're calling expireds. But there's something else that you told me about on our walk this morning that you haven't mentioned yet.
I can't remember what it was though.
They're kicking ass out of open houses.
Oh yeah, yeah. I because I do track all of this. They use their visual accountability whiteboard spreadsheets. We look at this all the time. They have to send it ahead of time. So I am not speculating here. I'm not guesstimating the answer to your question. I would say 40 to 50% are past open house leads. Some of them from like 2 weeks ago, but a lot of them from like during the holidays, going into the new year, that were just saying, I want to wait until the election's over. I want to wait until after the holidays. I want to wait until the blizzards are gone. You know, I'm ready to buy in spring and do it, close in the summer and be transacted before kids go back to school. So these are delayed last year open house leads, as well as current open houses. A lot of my coaching clients will have 20 to 50 couples or families through their opens, and that will give them at least 2 or 3 closable transactions. One of the most common things that we talk about in coaching is how your current active listings should lead you to your next 2 to 3 to 5 transactions. If that's not happening, you're not doing it right. And that might be open houses, it might be your pre-marketing, et cetera. So I think that all of the delays are gone. You know, we're not talking about drones anymore. We're not talking about the election anymore.
Right.
You know, we're kind of pulling out of winter in most of the country. And so now people are out of excuses. And also, I think that people have come to terms with the fact that 6.5% to 7% on an interest rate is okay, and they'll just refinance later when they come down.
Well, Julie,
or they'll do something right now to close at a better rate, like buying new construction.
but we did research on that prior to today's show because I asked you to tell me how long interest rate, like what's the average rate been for the last 20 years, and you tell me, what'd you come up with?
Over the past 20 years, if you throw out now you're getting into statistics. If you throw out the way high and the way low, it's right around like 6.8% is the average. Right. Over the past 30 years, it's more like 7 to 7.5% average. So now that we've been through 3 years, it's not like we were, remember back when we were pulling out of the pandemic and we were at 2.6, and then it's like you woke up one day and it was close to 7, right? So now the rates are like 6.8, depending on what you're doing. FHA, you can come in lower. You can buy down the rate with a builder. You can do an adjustable rate 5-1 ARM. You can do a 3-2-1 buy down. These are things that we didn't talk about during the pandemic because the 30-year fixed was 2.5% to 3%. You didn't have to talk about that.
So if you guys are running into these chronic delayers, you're not, again,
you may not be educating them on, I'm waiting for rates to come down. Well, did you know that today you can close at 5.5%? Well, how do you go about that? Why don't we sit down over coffee and I'll show you 3 different ways that you can do that, and we can decide what's best for you. I think some of this is on the agent.
Well, let's make this full circle though. So if you think about it, a lot of the delayers, right? A lot of the excuses, a lot of the headwinds, a lot of the problems these guys are having is because they're focused on buyers primarily. Yeah. And the buyers are the ones that are complaining about the interest rates. The buyers are the ones that are complaining about all the things. And when you hear agents having, and this isn't that, we're talking about 3 groups of agents. Remember, listener, viewer, we're talking about the ones that are agents that are killing it this year, the ones that are on track, or the ones that are behind. The ones that are on track and behind, they're the ones that are having troubles overcoming the objections from people about lack of inventory and interest rates. In other words, they are getting their mindset mired in the excuses of unmotivated buyers. Those are not things that sellers say. Those are unmotivated buyer excuses. So if you focus on sellers, you will not hear that crap anymore. Focus on sellers. And as far as what the buyers go, if a buyer says the interest rates are too high, what they're really saying is they can't afford the payment based on today's interest rates. That's it.
Yeah, that's right. As you know, we listen to Housing Wire a lot, and one of the things that Logan Motoshami says is if somebody comes to you and says, "Is now a good time to buy?" His answer is always, well, no. If you have to ask me, the answer is no. It's a good time to buy if you have been to a lender, if you're getting financing and you have run your numbers and you know that you can afford or not afford it. That's up to you as a buyer to make that decision if it's a good time for you to buy. And if you have to go around taking a Facebook poll to find out, you are probably not a buyer. And that's okay.
That's true.
There's also a lot of cash deals going on right now in the luxury, defined by, your own market, what you would declare luxury, but 45% of closings are all cash right now. So not everybody even is dependent on interest rates. I find that to be kind of a tedious, objection. But in some cases, maybe the buyer just hasn't been educated that it would be perhaps a good idea to go find a different type of loan.
The problem is the rate, but the problem really is the lack of skill from the real estate industry explaining to buyers how to buy the interest rate down.
Correct.
Whether it be from builders or whether it be from, like when you and I started selling real estate, Julie, it was abnormal for us not to have a buyer ask for the seller to pay their closing costs and sometimes points to buy the interest rate down.
Yeah. And almost everybody was closing at a 723 loan. So you locked in at a
Exactly.
lower rate for 7 years, and then you either sold or refinanced before your 23 years kicked in.
But hold on. So if you're selling a $400,000 house and someone's it's a buyer's market, let's say, or it's a balanced market, you can ask that seller, you can offer the seller, $380,000 or $385,000, or you can offer the seller full asking price and then ask them to contribute to the buyer's closing costs and what have you. Point being, is there are ways to make the interest rates lower, to make the payments lower.
So you use to just land the plane on that, is you use that seller contributed closing cost to buy down the rate, so the buyer is not out of pocket.
Yep, exactly.
Did you know there's some lenders, Tim, that are doing like 6 months of deferred payments for first-time buyers right now? There's all kinds of creative stuff happening.
Well, so what we're dealing with is an industry, agents for them that I think the demand is there. The interest rates are kind of a non-issue. I know you guys don't want to hear that.
But that's part of the point, is they're becoming more of a non-issue because we've had 3 years to deal with them being higher.
Exactly. And it's normalized now. Oh, and by the way, if you go back decades, that's really where our rates are now, is what they've always been.
It's the reason we bought our first house back in the early 90s, is because everybody said, oh my gosh, if you can close at 7%, you ought to go buy a house.
People literally were congratulating us. We were 22 and 23 when we bought our first house, and people were congratulating us because of our 7% interest rate. You remember that?
Yeah.
That was funny.
Keep that in perspective, right?
I know. But the real takeaway here is that the other thing is, you guys remember 6 months ago where everyone's saying there's not enough inventory? How many markets right now have a lack of inventory? If you're in Texas, you have so much inventory from new construction that it's incredible, honestly. And a lot of the builders are now paying above market rate buyer agent commissions. Julie and I shared on our podcast some builders in Texas that are paying over 5% buyer agent co-ops on $400,000 and $500,000 houses. And so this is really what we're dealing with now, is we're dealing with, I think, another macro trend that's coming to an end. We're dealing with an industry starting really 2007, 2008, that was teaching new agents, who then became team leaders, who then became brokers, who then became office managers, to buy leads and to buy leads and to buy more leads. And all the leads they were buying were being buyer leads. Nobody has been really focused on teaching agents to be listing agents. So if you want to know, in our opinion, the end of a trend, it's the end of the buying leads trend. And if you don't believe me, go to see what the agents who've been buying all the leads in your marketplace are saying about the quality of their leads. None of them are saying that they're better. So if you want to be part of what's going to be the next obvious, macro trend that'll last probably, 25 years, it's definitely tuning your mindset to be a listing agent. And so what is that all about? Learn to pre-qualify, learn to have conversations, learn to be more professional. Realize that right now we're sitting on what is absolutely the start of a massive upswing in real estate. We've talked about this, how Julie and I know that this is going to be 25 years of a real estate boom. We are at year 1 or year 2, arguably, of it starts at the bottom, then it works its way back up. And it's purely from demographics. If you look surely at the number of people that have to buy or want to buy, really the have to buys out there are extraordinary. And I'm talking about the baby boomers. I'm talking about the millennials, the Generation X, and all the younger generations. If you look, I'm not talking about immigrants. Like I read some article where someone would say home sales are falling because immigrants aren't buying. No, illegal immigrants were not buying real estate before. That's just a politicized headline full of malarkey. Yeah. So what's happening is now that people have settled into the realities of the interest rates, there is no recession. So don't believe that either. Remember, I said to silo up your mindset.
And tariffs are not going to wreck the world either.
Tariffs are on hold, probably not to return like everyone is fearful that they would. And you'll have in many markets more inventory than we've had in years. And now we know for sure there's a lot of folks that took themselves out of the market the end of last year, and they're coming back into the market this year. Here's what we're experiencing. It's a delayed spring market. That's it. And we've seen this before. But that's what it is. The folks that would have transacted at the beginning of this year are transacting now, and you're going to see a steady increase of real estate transactions for the rest of the year. It's very predictable as long as you don't read the, worst market since March of 2019. And how far is it down? 6 fewer homes sold. You guys get my point? And this is a good opportunity for me to thank all of you who've attended the masterminds Julie and I have been doing. If you hear Julie and I are a little bit worn out, it's because we've done 4 masterminds that each lasted on average 2 hours this past week, and we're going to keep doing them. And so what these masterminds are, they're focused on helping agents overcome the 3 biggest challenges that agents are having right now in the real estate industry. And how do we know what those 3 biggest challenges are aside from our intuition from being coaches? We polled all of our top coaching clients, and we asked them what they were experiencing, what their 3 biggest challenges were. We wrote them down. Julie and I did a lot of homework on those things. And then we are going to present to you the solutions. And there are things that you would be expecting, but things that will surprise you. And this mastermind is free. We've had, I don't know, it's probably 1,000 people attend so far, and the feedback's been overwhelming. We're spending more time thanking people for thanking us for the mastermind than we are in the actual masterminds, which I'm not complaining. It's wonderful, right? So if you want to attend the mastermind, which I know you do, just go to harrismastermind.com and register, harrismastermind.com. The link is below in the show description today, but just simply go to harrismastermind.com and register for the upcoming mastermind. We're going to do probably 3 more. Well, I know we're going to do 3 more because we've already scheduled them in the upcoming few days. So keep us busy. We love being busy. We love doing these masterminds. We love interacting with you guys. We love hearing, we love hearing about how Julie and I love it when we hear someone, I listened to you guys 6 months ago or 6 years ago, and I put these things in place. I used your open house plan. I went to your mastermind. I got this inspiration. I did this. And it's their before and after stories. So we love the before and after stories. They literally make us happy because it tells us that we're in alignment with our souls, which is being in highest and truest purpose with all of you guys. And our way of thanking all of you for keeping this the number 1 listened to daily podcast for real estate agents in at least the US is the masterminds. We know that you guys need an extra boost. We know you need an extra kick in the pants now more than ever. And that's what the mastermind is all about. It's going to educate you. It's going to motivate you. And you're going to have massive action that's going to take place because we're going to give you exact next steps after you've attended. So go to harrismastermind.com. So Julie, what are you thinking after having done all these masterminds of late?
Well, I mean, of course I might say this, but I think if anybody is not feeling motivated, that's what you want to do, because there's a lot of reasons to be motivated and to be surrounded by like-minded people who are going to things like masterminds and not just, holding up and waiting for the market to change and rates to come down and all these things. The market has changed. Okay. While you were waiting for it to change, there's more inventory, there's more opportunity, there's more enthusiasm. There are people who do need your help right now. You've just got to find those people for you to help and to be of service and to make it your best year ever. I think nearly every agent that I talked to, our coaching clients this week, almost every, I would say probably 90% of them are not lowering their expectations. They're raising their goals. Okay. It's just a matter of by how much are we willing to go after.
You say these little things and you keep talking because you don't realize how important they are. You do that all the time because you're used to being on coaching calls all day.
Right.
But let's talk about what you just said. And that's really important because I'm going to go back to the 3 groups of agents that we were trying to explain at the start of today's show, right? Those that are exceeding their goals, on track and behind. Every single one of them, the big takeaway that I gave every single one of them was reset your goals and set them higher. Why is that important? Now listen, listeners, I realize what I just said is 100% against all the mindset gurus and all the self-improvement types that you've heard. They're all, I like Julie's swagger when I said that. If you're not watching us on YouTube, you missed Julie's mannerisms and her sarcasm that comes out with her mannerisms. Sorry. It always makes me laugh. It's okay. You do it subconsciously. But you hear people all the time saying, Oh, you've got to give yourself a break. You've got to, you're working too hard. Set goals that are realistic that you can accomplish. Because after all, how are you going to feel if you set goals and you don't accomplish them? That type of crap. So, and just to summarize, you have to be greedy with your goals. When other people are fearful, Warren Buffett says this, when other people are fearful, be greedy. When other people are greedy, be fearful. Right now, what are people? They're being 100% fearful. So you need to be greedy. And I don't mean greedy in the sense that it makes you squeamish to even say the word, but I mean greedy in the sense that you deserve more. You can do more. You can get more out of this market, more out of your lives because of this market. In other words, expect more for yourself. But ultimately, when you're setting goals, especially if you're behind, but really any of the three categories, you've got to right now. And I know we're not even halfway through the year, but you really seriously, if you haven't set goals yet, Julie, make sure we talk about treasure map and talk about
Mhm.
things like that. But if you haven't set goals yet, you have to be setting unrealistic goals for yourself for the rest of the year. And I want to emphasize the word unrealistic. Julie, why is it important to set unrealistic goals, not goals that they know they can accomplish? Why is it important to set, like when you're working with one of your coaching clients
Mhm.
and they have a goal of making $1 million and you add up what they've made so far this year, you add up the commission they're going to earn from their pendings, you add up the commission they're going to earn from the listings that they're going to sell and the 3 buyers that they know that they're going to buy. And it turns out here it is May of 2025 and they know by the end of the year they're going to earn $1 million. Why is that person at risk of not only not earning $1 million, but actually losing traction, losing
Sure. Well,
momentum?
you can start to feel like that momentum is just going to continue whether you do anything about it or not, because you're sort of feeling that right now. When in fact, you have to do the look back. Where did those transactions come from? And how can you continue to do more and better with what's already working? They're looking at their past performance. If you've got 6 pendings and 3 of them are from open houses and 2 of them are from expireds and 1 was a referral, well, you can't control the referral other than talking to your past clients. You can, nudge them a little bit, but you can't really control referrals. You can control your success with expireds if you continue to be doing proactive lead generation with expireds. That's on you. So why wouldn't you double that down? If you've got 2 and you knew you could do that, why wouldn't you get 4 and shoot even higher,
But
right?
Julie, past future. So guys, it all goes back to this. The reason that Julie's clients are doing so well right now, and the reason a lot of you are doing so well right now, is because of the work you did 6 months
They
ago.
worked their butts off, even when they were working, and not feeling the love and the results because fourth quarter and the beginning of first quarter was slower. They
Right.
continued to do it. They continued to do what they didn't want to do when they didn't want to do it at the highest level, and that's very important that they continued it at the highest level, even though it seemed like, I always used to hate it when people would tell us, well, you're planting seeds. You have to wait for them to grow. Well, okay, you have to have a level of patience and you have to keep doing what you know will work. And to your point, the reason that my one-on-one clients are now adjusting up is because they're seeing the fruits of their labor. They can say, thank you, past Jeannie. Thank you, past Lance. Thank you, past Karen.
Well,
Thank you, for the work that you did fourth quarter, because now I have those closings.
so
But they
level
also
off
have to
there.
take care of future Lance and future Jeannie
Exactly.
and future Tammy. They have to be thinking ahead and not, fall into, even though it's, temporarily profitable complacency, that can really sneak up and kick you in the butt, especially remembering that naturally for most people, fourth quarter is slower anyway. So why wouldn't you work ahead? What I do with my coaching clients using the real estate treasure map, which is your real estate business and personal plan, we plan to do all of our production by Thanksgiving. That way you have something extra to be thankful for on Thanksgiving, and you're not really operating on a 12-month thing. You're trying to meet or exceed your goals. Most of my clients, like I think about several of them that are already on track to be at like 900,000 to a million GCI. Most of them are bumping it up to 1,250,000. I have one of them that's strongly considering doubling and shooting for 2 million GCI. Why? Because they have more listing inventory right now than they've ever had before. And because they know how to do the things that, with listings that create the next listings. And they now, because they've lived that life for 6 months, they now can project. They can say, as long as I maintain this level of listing inventory or higher, I ought to be able to create double the GCI. It's not guesswork, right? It's following the real estate treasure map. It's following what we teach with your magic number of listings. I take another example. I'm coaching a team that's consistently will close 300 to 400 transactions, right? So previously, especially during COVID and pulling out of COVID, amazingly, they were able to do 300 plus sides on 10 actives or less, which is incredible. That shows you the volume and the speed in which they were turning over, especially when rates were low. And now they are on track to do the same, but it's taken them almost 40. They're hovering at 38 actives because they were proactive and they saw their numbers.
So level off what you just said.
Uh-huh.
They adjusted to the market. And
That's
really
right.
what we're trying to say is you're benefiting right now from the past, the life you're experiencing right now, the health, the wealth, the happiness, the relationships, the money, the success, all the things that you're experiencing right now. Your created environment, your created world was as a direct result of what you did in the past. Could be yesterday, could be 10 minutes ago. Like I'm still riding high from my cup of coffee, So it could be 6 months ago. It could be a year from now. So your past you did what they didn't want to do, and they didn't want to do it at the highest level, at some level, right? In order for the future or the current you to be riding high on the benefits that you have now.
Yep.
If you, whether you're at, if you're ahead of your goals or on track, that's your greatest risk. It's because you're ahead of your goals and you're doing great right now because of past performance. And if you're not right now proactively lead generating, and right now not really drilling down on pre-qualifying, and right now not focusing on becoming a listing agent and getting your inventory up, the future version of you is going to be hating on the current version of you for not having done what they didn't want to do, and they didn't want to do it at the highest level. That is so freaking important. Right. And really you have to be harder on yourself now than you ever have been before, because the winds are starting to shift. They're going from headwinds and now they're starting to become tailwinds, but only if the agents that are focusing on not trying to make the old stuff work and focusing on what's working now in this market. They're acknowledging the fact, you know what? I did that for 5 years. It worked great for the first maybe 2.5 years, last 2.5 years. It didn't work so great. I'm not going to do it anymore. I had this business model and this was working really great. I was making all kinds of money on it during a different economic environment. It's not working now. I need to shift. I need to be thinking bigger. And that's one of the things that you guys got to be really taking into consideration, is the importance of doing what you don't want to do when you don't want to do it at the highest level every single day, not just when you have to. Not just when you burn the candle at both ends and you have no choices. That's how you build momentum. And this is the point Jules was making. In other words, if you're not doing what you don't want to do and you don't want to do it at the highest level consistently, if you're only doing it when you have to, what you're going to end up doing is having these ups and downs.
Yep.
Right.
That's right. The spikes, cash spurts instead of cash flow. It's directly reflective of your work efforts. And that doesn't mean that you can't take time for yourself and your family and celebrate your wins and have some holiday time and long weekends. Part of it, because we have our coaching clients so tuned into what we're talking about right now, part of our job also is to catch your potential burnout before you actually have it and say, hey, look, there's a 3-day weekend coming up. Why don't you take a break? Nobody expects you to have an open house on Easter. Okay?
Can I
say, so take a break.
I'm going to address something you just said. I think burnout only happens when you are doing the wrong thing. When you're essentially an A player chasing a B opportunity, when you're trying to make something work that won't work, and then you feel burned out and frustrated with yourself.
Well, like the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result or expecting a better result.
That's when you get burned out, because nobody feels burned out when they're having success after success. I mean, no one feels burned out from having too many closings and making too much money. I don't think it happens, right?
Oh, as our old broker used to say, are you having an off day? Go take a new listing. See how you feel then.
But isn't that true though? I mean, you're not going to get, you don't get burned out from excessive winning. It just doesn't happen. Nobody gets burned out from excessive winning. People get burned out from excessive losing or things feeling or those types of things. So
and that comes in different varieties. You might feel like you've got, you're working I see this sometimes, you're working the same 3 leads over and over and you want them to transact more than they seem to want to transact.
That's my point. Yes.
Yeah. That's like in your mind, you have 3 leads, but you don't really, because you want them to do something that they're not ready to do yet. And you're feeling burnout. And the danger is sometimes that agent will be like, well, why would I want more of this? It's because you didn't pre-qualify perhaps, or it's because you're not working with an abundance of leads and your desire for everyone to do what you want them to do is so strong. But that's not how things work, right?
That's your
Anybody who has
ego.
kids know that.
But that's your
Right?
ego.
It is your ego. They wouldn't say it's their ego though.
No, but that pertains to you thinking you can make an unmotivated client into a motivated client.
Because you're you.
Because you're winning personality. That is such an enormous waste of time.
Or even using scripts, right? So an unmotivated person is script proof. There's not a thing you can say. If I am not ready or I don't want to, I don't have a desire to transact, maybe not never, but not right this second. You could use the world's best script, in the world, and maybe you have a great personality too, but you cannot make me do something that I'm not ready to do. And I think that is an expression of ego, even though agents really don't look at it that way. They would say all the leads suck right now, but it's because you're not talking to enough people, pre-qualifying enough people. That's all.
Well, so again, this is a full circle conversation too, because I do want to focus on so if you're playing the big CRM drip campaign game, that's another macro trend that's absolutely come to an end.
Yes.
Your goal should not be, you don't win this game by having the most number of contacts in a CRM. You win this game by having the most number of closings. And the way you have the most number of closings is you are only working with the people that are actually going to transact. And how do you know who's actually going to transact? You pre-qualified them. You follow our scripts. That is 100%. Your mission should be to you should have no more. And this is what Julie's top clients too. Well, I'll ask you, if you have a client that shows up that has 20 leads that they're chasing, what does that tell you? Why is that a red flag? Or more even?
Or more. Well, first of all, I would say, how are you defining them as a lead? Is this just somebody in your CRM, or is this somebody who you've talked with, you've sat in front of, that they're pursuing their financing and you have a future appointment? It's probably too many. Depends on what their goals are, but it's probably too many. If they need to be doing 3 transactions per month, they probably need to be talking to 7 to 10 people seriously and meeting with them. And this happens more on the buyer side, where they'll say, well, I've got 20 active buyers. Really, how many of them are in buyer agency? How many have you done a buyer presentation with? What's your next step with them? Are you showing them property, or are they just in your drip system and you're waiting for them to raise their hand and say, oh, I like this house. Will you go and show it to me? That's not really what we're talking about. We're talking about having 3 people you've got appointments with this week. Make sense?
Well, 99% of the issues the agents are having right now are on the buyer side, not on the listing side.
Yes.
But I'll say 100% of the issues the agents are having now is because they don't know how to be listing agents. Would you agree?
With the exception of the top 5% that actually are listing agents. Yes.
Right.
And so, let me clarify something too, because I think that can be an intimidating statement for some of our listeners. When we say be a listing agent, I think some of you think, well, if I don't have 10 or 20 or 50 active listings, that I'm not a listing agent. In order to get started on this and to generate from your work and not pay referral fees and not buy your leads, it only takes, in the beginning, 1, maybe 2 really great listings where you are following a specific system of how to utilize that listing, not just to sell it. Of course, we want you to sell it and fulfill your obligation with your seller, of course. But in order for that to lead generate for you, there's maybe 10 things that you do systematically. We call it our new listing launch plan. Part of that is open houses. There's a lot that goes to that. But it only takes 1 really great, when I say really great, I mean like a normal house, normal neighborhood, good schools, something that people want to buy.
Well, we know people that have built entire careers off 1 listing.
Well, you could argue that about our career.
We did. That's true.
Our first listing. How many deals do you think we did from that first listing on 275 East Jeffrey?
Is that the address?
Yeah. I bet you it was 18 to 20 transactions. I was
going to say the same, because we would do open houses every Saturday and Sunday. We would go there and clean it. The house always smelled terrible because, despite our begging for Carl, was his name, not to make beer at home, he still would beer. Yeah, and it smelled worse than dirty gym socks. But we would do it every single Saturday and Sunday.
We would door knock before and after.
We would do. We had the vanilla when you walked in to try to offset the stinky beer smell. We would play Enya in the background so much that we wore out the CD. You guys don't know what a CD is. Well, it's something they had back when everything was black and white, and back before there was color, back when we all used to ride horses. Anyway, so
everybody would sign into our open houses. We would follow up with the same day.
We got a monstrous
prospect of FSBO across the street, etc.
We bought a monstrous for sale sign that was easily 2.5 times the size of a normal for sale sign that was reflective.
Home brochure box on the sign.
Exactly. And we worked the crap out of that, as Julie said. We would do open houses there all the time. But then what we would do is we would go and, as Julie just said, knock on all the for sale by owners or some of the expireds, and we invite them to the open house. And they would see us hustling. And guess what would happen? We ended up selling over 100 houses our first year in the business. And if you guys want to see what we looked like in the first year of the business, I posted pictures on Instagram. And I want you guys to go to our Instagram, Tim and Julie Harris, and obviously follow us. But look to see what we looked like. And then I want you to, looking at those pictures of those goofy looking kids with those clothes that didn't fit them because we got them all from thrift shops. Those two goofballs sold over 100 houses their first year and broke all records that's never been broken since. And it was from individual transactions doing the real work of real estate. And so back on track. If you're a new agent, and Julie, and we obviously in our coaching business and Premier Coaching in particular, probably 50% of the agents, maybe 40% of the agents that join are doing fewer than 5 transactions per year. I would say that's true.
Yeah.
So if you're a new agent right now, it's actually a bit of a blessing because you have the fewest number of things to unlearn, and you have the fewest number of mooring lines to cut so that
bad habits. Yeah,
exactly. And so you actually, despite your lack of time on the job or your lack of sales transactions, actually have the most potential to move the fastest because you have the least amount of junk to clear out of your head about what you think and how, oh, it used to be this way, it used to be that way. You know, you're still objective. So the best thing you can do is, obviously, I'm going to say this, but join Premier Coaching. And then when you're in Premier Coaching, there's a 90-day massive action plan that tells you exactly what you should be doing every single day, down to what exact activities you should be doing every single day for the first 90 days. Did I say that right, Julie? I see you typing. Oh, yes. And regardless, if you're, no matter what group you're in, every single one of you, the single biggest opportunity to become a listing agent, if you were to ask, look, attend the mastermind. We talk about this obsessively. Just go to harrismastermind.com. We talk to you guys a lot about lead generation, but absolutely positively, the number one source beyond your centers of influence and past clients, but the number one truly proactive source, expired listings. And if you don't believe me, go into your MLS and search in your entire MLS, not just your little micro market. And I want you to see how many expireds there are. There are thousands, and I don't care what market you're in. And those are all people. What is an expired seller? It is a seller who has their hand in the air saying, yes, I have a house to sell.
And I'm willing to list.
I'm willing to list. They listed before. You know what the price probably isn't because it expired. You know they're willing to pay a commission. You have all this information on this particular seller. You use our scripts. You use our pre-qualifying scripts. You send the pre-listing pack that we give you as part of Premier Coaching. You're going to take the listing and boom, you're a listing agent. So what does it mean to be a listing agent? To answer what Julie said a couple minutes ago, it's having the mindset that your dominant thoughts go towards being a listing agent. That's it. I am a listing agent and I do work on buyers, but my number one focus is being a listing agent. When you call a buyer back or a buyer calls you and you're pre-qualifying them, your whole objective isn't to get a buyer to work with you. Your number one job is to find out if that person has a house to sell. And we teach you guys how to do that. All of your best energies and strength, especially in this market, especially with the opportunities that are available now, have to be focused on becoming a listing agent because you're going to make the most net profit. Because you're going to, when you work with expireds and you work with as a listing agent, you can work normal business hours. You can literally say on your voicemail, hi, this is Tim Harris with eXp Realty. Thank you for calling. If you're calling after normal business hours or the nights and the weekends, please leave the best number for me to reach you and I'll call you right back. Otherwise, leave your name and number and I'll call you back usually within 5 or 10 minutes. That's your voicemail. You're telling them that you're not going to call them back after normal working hours or nights and the weekends. When you
have more control is what you're saying.
Yeah. When you are a listing agent, you have leverage. When you're a listing agent, there's not a single one of you watching your listing right now who have given a choice between having 20 great buyers or having 20 great sellers. Wouldn't choose the listings. For every one listing you have in our Premier Coaching program, we show you how to sell at least 2 houses. The listing's going to sell, and then you're going to get another transaction. But usually you can parlay that into way more than just 2 transactions. Long time.
Well, the fact is, if you had 20 active listings, you would also have 20 active buyers.
Yeah, well, maybe you might
if you wanted 10. Them.
If you might have 10, right? And if you don't, well, not all of them are going to buy, right?
Sure.
It depends on the market. But if you did have 20 active listings and you didn't want to work with the buyers, you can refer the buyer side transactions off to other agents in your
referral
marketplace.
Agents.
And Zillow has proven that agents are willing to pay a 40% referral fee. So if you want to, there was one of Julie's sarcastic looks, if you guys didn't notice, because the idea of paying a 40% referral fee,
Intolerable.
I mean, honest to God, how that's not something that's considered usurious is beyond me. It's so
It's
insane,
illegal.
but whatever. Agents are going to do it. Now, as far as Julie messaged me, if you want a really great source for expired listings, if you want to know how to hit the easy button and get access to expired information, the easiest way for you to do it is subscribe to RedX. Just text the word red to 47372. Text the word red, the color red, RED to 47372. And when you do, we'll text you back a link where you can join RedX. And what RedX does is every basically morning before you wake up, it goes into your MLS and it searches for all the new expireds, finds all the phone numbers, makes sure it hasn't been relisted, sends you the property information, the whole 9 yards. And then when you wake up in the morning, you're going to be in your office and you're going to get all the new expireds. You're going to use our scripts and you're going to call those sellers and you're going to set appointments. And then you're actually going to go on listing appointments. And I know some of you, oh my gosh, that sounds like something I would never do. Well, then don't do it. And then, see what happens. Try it. Find out what we're talking about. Discover what we're telling you is the truth about how to actually make lots and lots of profit in real estate. Discover what we're trying to prescribe to what we are prescribing to all of you and trying to get all of you to understand as being the best way to build a sustainable long-term real estate businesses as a listing agent. You're going to have to learn things that you don't probably know now. You're going to have to do what you don't want to do and you don't want to do at the highest level. You're going to have a mindset of abundance consistently. And the only way you're going to really manifest that abundance is by isolating yourself, siloing yourself, eliminate all forms of negative input from everybody and everything. And just remember, your highest and truest purpose on this planet is to be of service to other people. And when you're calling expired sellers, the purpose of you calling that seller is to, yes, get a listing and yes, make commission, but it's to help that seller. That mindset puts you in alignment with your highest and truest purpose on this planet and makes the work enjoyable, makes the work, even when you get pushback from the seller, it makes it so that you are not feeling it personally as much. You're saying this seller may be giving me a little bit of pushback because they're scared and they have a problem that I need to solve. Not everybody reacts the same when they're under stress. A lot of people get defensive, and an expired seller, probably 20% of them, will act that way. And that's
But
okay.
that just means they need you that much more.
Exactly. And this is, if you're trying to avoid any kind of interaction that might result in the word no, you're not going to make it in real estate. You're not going to make it in any form of sales.
Well, but it's how you translate that no, is that it's not an attack on you personally. It's
No.
just not now. They just don't need your help. Why is that about you? They just don't need your help.
That's the easy button, right? You don't want to immediately go with that. You want to make sure you're delivering
Well,
a
drill
script.
down first and determine why they said that.
Well, find out if there
yeah.
is there no, because it's tied to lack of motivation. If it's tied to lack of motivation, so Mr. Seller had this property sold. Where were you going next? Well, we don't know. If it's sold, we are thinking about here or there or there, that place. So, Mr. Seller, just so that I'm clear, if I were to pop by with a buyer that wanted to, close on your home, buy your home, close on your home, this buyer had no issues with the inspection, the appraisal, no issues whatsoever. In other words, this is the buyer you've been hoping for, and they wanted to close and be in your house in the next 60 days. Would that pose a problem for you? And they're going to say, well, yeah, it would. I don't have a place to go.
Where would I go next?
Where would I go next? Well, that's not a very motivated seller. No, I'm not. We're going to hold it off the market. We're going to remodel the kitchen. Okay, you're getting an insight into what their motivation is. Or if they say, no, that would not be a problem whatsoever, I'm hoping that
We'd figure it out. Sometimes they'll say that even after they present it as no, not right now. Well, we'd figure that out.
Right. And then you're going to say, okay, so if this buyer wanted to purchase your house, or if a buyer wanted to purchase and close in your house, where were you going to go next? And they're going to say, well, we're moving to Florida. We're moving to North Carolina. Well, that's exciting. Ideally, how soon do you need to be there? Well, we have a new home that's actually finished construction in the next 90 days. And we're hoping to be, okay, what do you have then? You've got their motivation. You've got their time frame. You've got the fact they still want to sell. So Mr. Seller, it sounds to me like, ideally, you would have liked to have been in Florida already. So let's do this. I'm sure you'll agree this just makes sense. Let me pop by and see the house today at 5 o'clock or 5:30 be better. And I'll show you what we can do to get the property sold so that, frankly, 90 days from now, you don't have to be in the same position of having an unsold property. So would 5 o'clock or 5, so it's not, 5 o'clock or 5:30 be better for you? And they're going to say 5:30. and they're going to say, well, are you going to bring a buyer by? And you're going to say, well, I need to see the property first to see if it's a match for any of my buyers. But while I'm there, I'm also going to show you what I'm going to do to get the property sold. So Mr. Seller, look for a package of information that I'm going to deliver to your door prior to our appointment. And it's going to be our pre-listing pack. And the pre-listing pack is going to answer all the questions that you have about what I'm going to do to get the property sold. But here's why I'm excited to deliver this to you right away. It's going to answer all your questions about why the property didn't sell. And I got great news for you. It probably wasn't the reason you've been told. So you're going to discover when you deliver this information that I'm going to deliver to you right away, or I'll have my assistant drop it off, why the house didn't sell and what we're going to do to get it sold this time. So make sure you've read that information prior to me getting there so that when we're there, frankly, we can just focus on what's most important to you. Make sense? And they're going to say yes. Now, that's the pre-listing pack. You're going to have pre-qualified them. You have their motivation. I've just given you guys step 3 and 4 of our 7-step listing process. You need to learn all of this. And when you do, you're going to be excited every single day. And I do mean excited about the opportunity you're going to create for yourself to pick up the phone and proactively lead generate. You will never be excited about prospecting. You're going to be excited from what comes as a result of you prospecting. Does that make sense, Julie?
It absolutely does. And it's okay if you're not excited about prospecting, as long as you are excited about what it will bring for you and your family, not to mention all of the sellers and buyers that you're going to help. So as long as you're focused on the right thing, this business does get easier.
It does. And we've done a terrible job today talking about things other than real estate.
Yeah.
Well, it's the avalanche of masterminds we've done. Speaking of which, there's links below in the show description. Make sure you guys go to harrismastermind.com and register for one of the upcoming events, harrismastermind.com. If you'd like to join Premier Coaching, we made it very easy for you. You can just go to premiercoaching.com and join Premier Coaching right away, or just text the word Premier to 47372. But look, any way we can serve you guys in this market, we are here to help all of you. Whether you're ahead of the market, you're having your best years ever, fantastic. Consider Julie to be your elite coach or one of our other coaches. If you're on track, I beg you not to slow down. Remember, you're ahead of your market, you're having your best year ever, or you're on track because the efforts of the past version of you need to be taking care of the future version of you. And if you're way behind, well, guess what? We've given you a very clear path forward. So any closing thoughts for these guys, Julie? I see.
Well, tell them how they can be part of the next upcoming mastermind.
Right. Just go to harrismastermind.com or click the link below in the show description, and you can register for one of the upcoming masterminds. In the meantime, hopefully you've enjoyed today's show. We did it today without notes. I don't think it was too bad, Julie.
Not too bad. No.
Yeah, not too bad.
You never know on Fridays.
You don't. We didn't have any zany stories, but we'll hold some in reserve for next Friday. But listen, guys, thank you. Our podcast is consistently one of the top 50, and last week it was top 30 podcasts in the world in our sections on iTunes. It's been that way for years. It is such a pleasure and an honor for us to be part of your lives. And you guys really are part of our lives too. We love hearing from you. So if you've got any show ideas, if you've got any questions, any topics, anything that you want us to be more focused on, maybe we're missing the mark in your mind on something. Maybe you aren't in agreement with something we said, or maybe you just like to, show appreciation and gratitude, whatever, let us know. You can message us directly on Instagram. Just direct message me on Instagram. And I do check all of those. And also, I do need to say this. I had an onslaught of people wanting to join with Julie and I at eXp Realty. And that was probably 30% of the calls I had last week is from teams and individual agents that want to do a broker upgrade. It is a really smart thing for you to at least consider upgrading your brokerage experience to eXp Realty. And I've made it easy for you. Text the word the letters EXP, the word EXP to 47372, and we'll text you back a link to our eXp Realty group site where you can see all the benefits that Julie and I offer on top of what eXp offers, which is pretty extraordinary in itself. Or you can, the link below to check out our eXp Realty group site is there as well. And for those of you who are in eXp Realty, and you're interested in co-sponsoring with Julie and I, of course, we'd encourage that as well. But regardless, level 1, if you're interested in joining eXp Realty, is understand what we're all about and check out our eXp Realty site. Again, just click the link below in the show description or just text the letters EXP to 47372. EXP to 47372. If you are ready to join EXP and you're looking for a sponsor that will be very proactive in your success, I would love the opportunity to prove to you that Julie and I would certainly fit the bill for that job. So text me directly on my cell phone. This is if you're ready to land the plan and you're ready to choose your sponsor and you want it to be Julie and I. text me directly at 512-758-0206, 512-758-0206, and we'll have a conversation. And when you text me, let me know a little bit about yourself. This is Bob from Oregon, and this is how long I've been selling real estate and things like that. That way we have a basis of starting the conversation. But either way, guys, we are here to be of service to you. So thank you for listening today. Thank you for continuing to allow us to do this podcast. I'd say, Julie, if there's only one thing I could do in our real estate business, this would be it. In our coaching business, I just do the
Me too.
podcast. Yeah.
Yep.
It's the most fun.
I agree.
For sure. You guys have a fantastic day. We'll talk with you on the show tomorrow.